The theme of this session is the big move, tomorrow's world. What is the next disruption coming from? It's my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator of this session, Dr. Anil Pillai, Director, Terragini Consulting Private Limited. Spanning a professional career of over 2 decades, Anil is an experienced engagement strategy expert. His area of expertise is in building and executing customer engagement, customer experience, and customer centricity solutions for organizations. He's one of the pioneers in India in the areas of data analytics and customer experience. Let's welcome the panel along with him. Mr. Samrat Das Gupta, VP Marketing and New Brands, Visage Lines, Bombay Shaving Co. Samrat leads marketing, technology, and new initiatives at Bombay Shaving Company. In the last 18 years, he has enabled both.
So this is a session that's a forward-looking session. So we're going to be looking at what is to come. And you have different perspectives on this panel today on what is to come, what are those trends, what should you be looking for, what's going to shift your life, both as a customer and perhaps as a solution provider or as an employee. And then we're going to quickly get into, so what are these mega trends? And then we're quickly going to get into what do these mega trends mean for customer channels, for marketplaces, cultural impacts, as well as customer segments. And then we'll try and cover what does this mean for customer engagement, what does this mean for existing customer engagement practices, and what does it mean for organizations to retool themselves for the tomorrow. And finally, we'll wrap it up with what does it mean for employees in an organization? What does it mean for internal working teams? What do these shifts mean? So we are hoping to give you two takeaways from today's 1 hour. One takeaway is what are those large mega trends that one should look out for, read about, and possibly investigate. And 2, what are those practical takeaways at the customer engagement and the people engagement level that will help you to drive your businesses better. Now, before I go to my first panelists, I'm going to give you my 4 or 5 mega trends, and that'll kind of, and then I'll get it out of the way. To my mind, there are many mega trends that are happening in a country like India. I've picked 5 that I think are very interesting to watch out for. For one, 80% of our households by roughly 2029, 2030 will be middle income. This will be up from 50% today. That's a significant shift. But what's more interesting is that your essential category spends will increase by roughly 2.5 to 3 times. And services spending by consumers will go up by 4 to 5 times. 50% of this is going to be new spending. But interestingly, 50% of this is going to be where customers want to buy better. So they're going to go up the value chain, both in terms of experience as well as products. So this is really interesting for me as a professional in this space. The other shift that we all know, there is a huge and very fast or accelerated convergence between rural, urban, and urban. And this I have seen personally in the last year or so, maybe more than a year, when we've done work across different kind of product categories. This convergence is really accelerated. And lastly, two very interesting points is that there is a shift towards innovating for India. So there's a huge shift towards localization and contextualization for the Indian consumer and for Indian context. So no longer are Indian organizations and Indian consumers happy with taking something that's invented out of India in the West, for example, and transplanting that in India as a straight fit. Those days are gone. I think we're going to see an accelerated shift in the direction of localization and contextualization. So that's the other thing. And finally, the rise of the Indian entrepreneur. I think you're going to see many more single-person businesses and entrepreneurs coming out of this country for the next few decades. So those are my 4 or 5 trends, and I'm going to go straight into Sarojit first. Sarojit, I was hearing one of your talks with IIM Calcutta on transformation, and you had a slide full of shifts in that. So I'm going to come straight to you, and probably you can take off from where you left off on that talk and give us your view on what are those mega trends, and then I'll take you to the rest of the panelists. So Sarojit, all yours right away.
So thanks, Anil, and thank you everyone who's listening in and for the opportunity. I think taking off from what Anil said, I would go one level higher than where Anil started, which is on the world. So, there are two distinct things that we keep hearing. We say that we are in a VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and with a few problems and few, unfolds as food, energy, and water. So that's, I think, to me, that's the one paradigm that I always look to when I'm trying to understand what's happening in the world around us. But within that, in that VUCA world, when you kind of get too hung up about the volatility and the uncertainty, you probably overlook the fact that there are about 10,000 trends on last count or even more, which can be predicted to clockwork precision. So how is the world aging? That's a big trend, can be predicted. How is the world urbanizing? 480 cities in the world is going to contribute 80% of the world GDP. How is the shift between America and the US happening? The China and the US happening. And you know that China will now overtake the US as the first and largest economy in the world by 2028, most likely, rather than 2032, which was earlier predicted. So there's the north-south shift. And the last but not the least, how is technology being adopted? You can actually predict the penetration of the internet in India. And for the last 8 years, mind you, the average forecasts have been more than correct. So, when you look at those four large trends, that you have an aging economy, so the silver economy as it's called, so you'll have more goods and services which are being produced for people who are older. You will have more goods and services being consumed by people whose primary source of income is actually pension or dependency or insurance or from the investments that they have, including property. The third thing is when you look at the urbanization continuing, if we have the kind of cities that we have built and we replicate them, we will not have a planet left. Already, sustainability is a big issue. So I think the underlying factor is, how do we continue to support the energy economy which we have created, which is a coal and a gas-based economy, and transit this to more affordable yet more sustainable energies while we continue to have economic growth, because we have become used to an economic growth, and the world will go from whatever 7.5 billion to 9 billion to about 11 billion. So there is 3.5 billion people waiting in the wings to come into the planet before the world starts aging. And I think everything that we see in terms of predictions has to be seen from that sustainability versus economic growth versus the energy transitions and the opportunities that throw. Because aggregate demand ultimately is a function of employment, and employment is going to be under threat from all the technological growth that is happening. So over to you, Anil. I think the trends will impact the different clusters and the different industries differently, but sum and substance, watch out for ESG as a company, watch out for the emerging sustainable consumer, and ensure that as the economy, employment happens. Otherwise, we are looking at very tough times ahead. You're on mute, Anil.
Yeah, sorry. So thank you, Sarojit. I'm going to come to you, Samrit, and I'm going to take on something that Sarojit just mentioned. This whole thing of this aging economy, which is a dichotomy with India, because we are not an aging economy.
Yeah.
We are a very young economy, and we are an economy that's going to have many, many more young people than possibly the rest of the globe put together. So therefore, when one looks at the world and then one looks at India, there's a significant phase shift in the way we look at markets, right? Samrit, what's your view on that?
So a couple of things, right? And thanks for this. I think the walls have started to break down very, very quickly, right? And by walls, I mean the economic walls have started to shift. You have more disposable income in the hands of people who earlier would struggle to a certain extent, right? Data has become extremely democratized. So you have people who are being able to take very sharp and very strong decision spaces, whatever phone they hold now. It's kind of democratized, right, to a very large extent. There is a younger population which is dictating the kind of products that emerging companies are making. So there's a gradual trend shift that if you see, even in, let's say personal care, I'm going to take that example because it's closer to me and then we can move on to other things. we are having to reinvent our portfolios very quickly. And that portfolio reinvention is a tectonic shift because it's a large supply chain shift, it's a raw material shift, it's a data shift, it's the way we build things, it's the way we sort of store things, it's also the way we sort of market things, right? So all of that, when it comes together, you have a consumer set which is asking for a lot more. It's constantly bored now. There's an endless scrolling. When you are looking at commerce and you look at digital scrolling, there's an endless scroll, so you have to solve for that. One mega shift that I have seen in the last about 7 to 10 years, and I'm very happy with that shift, is the degree of microfinancing and microfinancial ability that is there in especially the tier 2 and the tier 3 markets. And that, I think, is a great example of how you mentioned this, Anil, when you said that there's a rise of the Indian entrepreneur, right? But every time we think of the rise of the Indian entrepreneur, we end up thinking of the Forbes 30 under 30 and the 40 under 40s. Whereas the real entrepreneur that has come up is the woman sitting, let's say in Bhiwandi, who earlier used to sort of just, she was at home, but now she's being able to pack her goods and sell them on a social commerce platform or sell them on an Amazon or a Flipkart. And her degree of entrepreneurship has led to two massive shifts. One is a cultural shift. So more money has gone to the hands of the woman by the sheer digital enablement of commerce, right? And I think that democratization is extremely critical, and that's going to be a cultural shift that will stay with us for a long period of time. I am very happy that's happened, but I think it needs to happen a lot more, right? So that's one, right? And the last piece, which is the younger audience is coming in to dictate completely with Sarajit. Indian younger audiences who are between the age groups of, let's say, 22 to 35, there is a certain degree of appreciation of sustainability, of consumer consciousness, which is about planet consciousness and process consciousness. So I think these two things become extremely important when organizations start to navigate that wheel. But the microfinancing piece and the sustainability piece are too important.
That's a great point, Samrit. And I'm going to bring in Shubhajit. You having worked in two very different cultures, Emirates and now Indigo, and I know that you're a sector that's currently under stress. And I know that these mega trends have really affected a lot of these businesses. But going forward, I remember reading somewhere that leisure travel will get back into shape, but business travel is going to get affected. How does that play in your business, and what does that mean for you as from a trend perspective?
Sure, Anil. Thank you for that, and thanks for those who are listening in. Well, I think if you look at the demographic profile, as Sarajit pointed out, that of course we do have a young population. So typically, as we speak, the youth population is in the range of 50%, and within that, between age group of 14 to 25, it constitutes around 20% of the population. Now, the situation will not be the same going forward because you are looking at that population aging. So by 2036, the estimate is around 34.7% of the population would be in the middle age bracket. So what does that mean from a leisure standpoint? Is that yes, you do have a population fit enough to undertake leisure travel. That's one. Second is we expect the disposable income to improve, and that's predominantly because of increase in the entrepreneurship. More number of people are getting engaged in the commerce and business activities. So from that standpoint, yes, leisure travel will certainly pick up. On the business piece, again, of course, there are two schools of thought. But if you really look at these subsegments of the business travel segment, you will see that you have multiple different, travel patterns. So one is, let's say, the SME owners traveling for purposes of meeting up their customers, etc. Other piece is, of course, the pure play corporate travel. Now, yes, some part of that business will certainly be under stress, and that's quite obvious because people are used to in terms of online meetings, etc. But I think one thing which people are not talking enough is the fact that as companies save cost in terms of going digital and online, etc., and as the overall economy improves, you will have that many number of more business people in the ecosystem, which will lead to that travel. So it's all about how you measure the segment. So as when we sort of expand on the economic front, what will happen is that the volume of business travel eventually is bound to increase. And that's again a massive segment that we are talking of, who do not travel now. Parallelly, also, there are some amount of travel which happens not specifically for purposes of discussions that can take online. So you really need to have that sort of one-to-one conversation, etc., which will always be preferred, and that is a business which should certainly come back. It's a matter of time. So that's as far as the travel is concerned. And I think on the other side, as you know, that cargo is something which is a line of business has picked up phenomenally. And as a segment, again, that's a high growth segment, simply because people want fast delivery and reliable delivery, and that's a space which would be a very important revenue stream going forward.
Thank you, Subhajit. I'm going to come to you, Namrata, and it's very interesting because I know you've always been very passionate about leveraging technology. I remember seeing an interview of yours with HT, I think, where you talked about VR. From your Mahindra days, where people were using VR in showrooms to choose color and stuff like that. So very fascinating. So we all know that digital is a very large shift, and much has been talked about it. But I'm going to now shift gears and get into a little more details on customer segments. So, when you have a situation where three worlds are colliding, the urban consumer, the urban consumer, and the rural consumer, what do you think will the digital ecosystem, how does the digital ecosystem serve these very disparate customer segments? And therefore, and do you see that as a challenge? And do you also see that as impacting experience as we go ahead?
Anil, I think it's interesting because, when, and again, I'm going to go back to the past experience that you were referring to, when we actually went out and did some market research to understand, the urban consumer and the rural consumer, what we found was it was not a function of geography, but it was a function of mindset. So you could have somebody sitting in Delhi or a Bombay or a metro city, and they could still have a very traditional mindset, versus you could have somebody, sitting in Punjab, and they have an entire family of NRIs all over the globe, and they could have a very, very progressive mindset. Now, I think this was very revealing to us at that point in time that, the urban-rural divide in our minds is, geography-led, but in reality, it is actually far more, a mindset issue as opposed to a geography-led issue. So coming to your question about, whether the urban and the rural divide is a challenge or not. I think when I look at it from the context of customer or consumer preferences, what we have to understand is that, do those preferences come in as a result of a constraint, or do those preferences come in as a result of actual, preferences that people may have? So if we take the COVID situation, a lot of people have started doing reverse migration to their native places, living out of there, and they have, started embracing sort of, working from home as the way. And I think that is a trend which is here to remain. Now, given that context, I think what will become important is that those same customers who are living in rural or urban India are going to want the same amenities, the same facilities that they have in urban India. And it is an opportunity, as I see, for marketers, for businesses to really, work towards providing that. So I don't see it as a challenge. I see that as an opportunity. And even in the pre-COVID era, I had started seeing, facets of that. So my work travel took me to places like Kolhapur, Sholapur, etc. And when you look at these tier 2, tier 3 cities, you would be surprised to actually find, when I visited one of the universities, you had students sitting in there and, solving AI challenges, PhD students solving AI challenges for, organizations who were based out of Boston or who were based out of the US or Australia. So I think it's a lot about mindset shift. It's a lot about, if you can provide the customer the same amenities, the same, the same things that they're used to in urban world, back in the rural areas, they would be very open to it. And that's where I see a certain level of, sort of shift happening as we move forward. So that would be sort of one area that I would consider, more of it as an opportunity as opposed to a challenge.
Sure. Thank you for that, Namrata. So I'm going to come to you, Tejas. You're a person who does a lot of customer conversations around loyalty and repurchase. And that affords you a lot of opportunity to look at how consumers are coming back for what they like. And I often, I'm not going to put you in the spot here, but I often hear this phrase that loyalty is dead. And at least the traditional definition of loyalty is dead. And I can see some of my panelists smiling on that. So essentially, I want to ask you, what is your take on this new emerging customer confluence, as Namrata said, this whole emerging opportunity that in the rural India and urban India is providing, and how does it impact loyalty and conversation from your perspective?
Just to give you, I think COVID has really reconsidered this concept that loyalty is not dead anymore. In fact, all the revenue, we run a lot of the large retail where we run their CRM programs. And pretty much all the brands where they've done a core, CRM program have sailed through decently well. In fact, their customers who've come back to redeem and the customers who've come back, to come and shop with them, 60-70% of them have been because they know the brand before.
Okay, I take back that loyalty is not dead.
So I think, I think COVID has been great for us as a company, because the last 8 years we've been selling that you should be doing CRM, and now the brands are saying, tell us, how do we keep customer first, right? So in that objective, I think it has been it's been great for the brand to realize that we should start making the company customer first, right? From the point of conversations and obviously what we are seeing as trends that is coming in is that personalization or hyper personalization is really picking up. One trend which is really known already is, if you look at US also, is that it has been 7 or 8 years. E-commerce journey has happened within the last 3 months, right? Or last 4 months, technically. So the brands which are purely offline are now seeing the customer across platforms. So be it on Facebook, be it on any other social platforms, be it on their e-com platforms. So obviously one of the trends that the brands have to start doing is that how do they keep themselves understanding all those touch points across platforms. And so that's one core point which we are realizing, that the customer is now becoming everywhere. And brands are not being able to touch the customer across all channels. So one of the core trends is that obviously everyone's getting into this concept of CDP, though it was very well defined, but really nobody was following it. So one of the core things on how brands will evolve is that they will really have to start connecting to the customer across all channels. Right? So that's one core trend which I'm seeing. The second part on what Namrata was talking about rural, we're actually seeing a lot of conversations happening in in vernacular language. So it's one other trend which we're really seeing is that the next level of commerce will take place in doing vernacular communications. Right? So that's another super trend which we are seeing in what we are doing at this point. The third, which we are really seeing, and to collaborate with all of them, have been saying is that logistics is going to become hyper local, right? So you will have to be delivering as fast as possible. So that's the 3 core trends which we are seeing from what we've been doing in the last 7-8 months. So we created a platform on this whole platform on conversational commerce, and we realized that customers are ready to shop on a platform like WhatsApp. They're ready to shop like platforms like Facebook for them and connect to the customer to buy, right? So those kind of things are really revelations on what we are seeing on how customers are changing.
Perfect.
That's the 3 things which I would put in, and
very good. Thank you, Tejas. So Samrit, I'm going to come to you. Are you seeing an emergence of any new customer segments that you thought my God, I never thought that such a segment existed. Anything like that stood out over the last whatever couple of years that you saw?
No, I think the customer segments were always there, right? It's just that the money has come in the hands of a set of people who earlier would have probably gone to a small store and tried to buy something, and they would have had a limited choice of products to buy from. So it's not so much a customer shift that's happened. What's happened is the depth of their queries, right? And it's the degree of.
Could you just repeat that? No, sorry, Samrit, we lost you. What do you mean by depth?
Okay. So earlier, if someone was very willing to go to a store and just pick something off the shelf, right? Now the journey that they go through is very different. They'll go to the store, they'll take the product, they're going to go and scan that on Amazon. They're going to read 10 reviews of it. They're going to go and watch a YouTube review, and then they end up buying it. So there is far more depth in terms of the decision tree here, right? And the shift is actually that. The shift is when you need to start solving for reviews, you need to start solving for ratings, you need to start solving for information that helps people arrive at whether this decision is great or not, right? Imagine how mobile phones were sold earlier. You would go to a store, there would most likely be a small store next to you. You would go and you would pick up the first Nokia or the Samsung purely on the transfer of trust that there would be at retail. Now you first end up watching 10 reviews of it. You will, the customer is going through an Amazon review piece, they're going through a YouTube, and then they come and buy it, right? So the shift is actually not so much in the customer segmentation, it's in the way people are buying it, right? And that's where the difference is. And that's where, how Tejas is saying that there is a whole bunch of vernacular content that is being created, right? It is, again, going back to the idea what Namrata was talking about, where you have AR and VR, where you want to put the product in the hands of the people and they can actually almost feel it and experience it. Some of the things that we do at Bombay Shaving Company is we look at the queries that happen at retail, map that to the queries that happen on Google and Facebook for our particular product set. And that's how we figure out where to supply and how much to supply. So it's a very interesting triangulation that can be done right now if you have an omni-channel presence and you look at the emerging search trends that happen offline and online, you just marry them together. So it's seasonal variation, it's language variation, it's age, it's gender, but all of that now sits in terms of what I call this gazillion data points, which needs to come together, and that helps you inform many decisions from a business perspective. Consumer hasn't changed. The way they're shopping has changed.
So that's a very interesting point. And Sarajit, I'm going to ask you this question. There was a time when the guy who was to look at data was supposed to look at data and was devoid of any contact with how customers looked at the company's products and services. And then you had the guys who were selling to customers who had no clue on how and what data could do for them. I think that line is now blurred to my mind, and we see that quite often. But in your mind, from a B2B perspective, or from an organization that doesn't really have too many end consumers, you have maybe a B2B2C thing happening. How do you see that panning out in terms of marrying data efficiently to consumer choices, like Samrit mentioned, and figuring out are there new emerging segments, or have customers' buying behaviors changed? How mature do you think organizations are at this point in time on that journey?
So first, Dr. Anil Pillai, a disclaimer, otherwise my marketing guys would kill me. And that will also address Samrit's point. Our B2C sales, where we are selling to a customer and not, is only 22,000 crores. So,
that's what the MD would tell you.
And
that just came in very smoothly, very smoothly.
Yeah. Well done, sir. Well
done. And that's about 30% of our sales and growing. And like it happened in India, we have a platform called Ashiana. And in that platform called Ashiana, we are sorting 5 problems. So far, 2 years ago, if you were an Indian customer, an individual home builder, you had 5 problems. Problem number 1, you had Mannat or Shah Rukh Khan's home design, but you did not have the same design in, say, Gorakhpur that Namrata was talking about. Second, you did not have an architect or a so-called mason or a contractor in Gorakhpur who could build that for you and credibly. Third problem you had was that you did not have you did not know how much of material to buy. The fourth problem, you did not know whom to buy it from and where to buy it from one place. And fifth problem you had is the project management became the project because either people were waiting for material or material was waiting for people. Now, Aashiyana solves all those problems for you. And again, it doesn't move the dial for us, but we are last year, I think this year we'll end up about 700 crores of online sales in a category like steel. And by God's grace, it is profitable. So if it were a separate company, you can look at the kind of valuations that it may command. In our kind of, it's just a tool for us to sell more, sell better, and all the good things. Point being the following. It doesn't matter today, B2B, shop online, buy offline, buy online, buy offline, shop online, that all Sobo, Boso, whatever else you had, really does not matter. It's very, very simple. You have customer decision journeys, you have moments that matter, and you have omni-channel capabilities to create magic in the moments that matter. Irrespective of the business that you're in, like Shubhajit was saying that, the segments are becoming a segment of one. So new segments are actually micro segment where resources are global and the segment is one. Like Samrit was saying, microfinance is becoming available, creating opportunities for everyone. Like Namrita was saying, the aspirations and the ideas are going into the towns. Like Tejas was saying that, look, content is king and multilingual is the new emperor. So if you put all of this together, ultimately to us, it comes down to those three basic things. Customer decision journeys, whether it's Maruti or whether it's Samrit, whether it's Maruti buying steel for making the car or it's Samrit buying the car, doesn't really matter. It's a customer decision journey. It just has a different name and form. There are moments that matter, critical decision points, and there are interventions that you need to be able to house. Over to you, Anil.
Great. So, a valid point. And here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to come to each one of you, and I'm going to start right now with Shubhajit, and I'm going to ask you the following question. The question is this: based on all what we've discussed, what do you think are the top 3 disruptions that you see in the way customers are being served? It could be small disruptions, it could be big disruptions, but because that's really what the audience wants to know. They want to know, boss, after we finish this session today, what are the 3 disruptions I need to either plan for or build into my business? So I'm going to put Subir on the spot here to go first, and then I'll come to each one of you very quickly, your 3 takeaways on disruption for customer engagement.
Sure, Anil. So you see that the top 3, I would say, one is, the expectation of personalization in terms of service or product, whatever the case may be. And when we talk of personalization, we are not talking of the typical personalization irrespective of a cost neutral position. So personalization along with cost efficiency. And that is where technology intervention has a big role to play. So I guess that's a very important trend because on the product side, the manufacturing side, you have, be it a pharma capsule or be it a footwear, all the products eventually will be personalized, and that is where things like 3D printing, additive manufacturing, etc., I think is a major trend which will come in. On the services end, again, you have the emerging technologies, you have VR and AR giving you the real life feel from a customer standpoint, whereas on the operational standpoint, you have data-driven intelligence, basically real-time data guiding front-end teams to personalize a service and perform the task more efficiently. So that's one trend which I see. The other, I would say, is brand engagement. I think the customers, if you see globally, are more engaged with brands these days, and the expectation is of a higher visibility of the entire value chain, as opposed to being just a consumer of products or services. And as Tejas and Samrit also mentioned. So I think visibility of the ecosystem in terms of, whether it be an issue of let's say environmental friendliness is concerned, or issue of a child labor or a safety of worker is concerned, I think those would gain prominence in terms of the visibility. The third piece, of course, is the speed of delivery. And by speed of delivery, the expectation is that the shelf life of products, so to say, is reducing and would reduce further. And that is why you see trends like micro warehousing picking up big time. Whereas you sort of position products closer to the customer. And that is, again, something which, you have IoT, which would make a huge difference. And I think for that to happen, to be a game changer, the introduction of 5G would be a very, very important aspect in that space, because once you have the faster connectivity, the IoTs would sort of increase the bandwidth in terms of how we look at it. So I think these are, the top three, so to say, trends that I guess across products and services would prevail.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Shubhajit. I'm going to add one trend that I think is very disruptive, just to take on from what Shubhajit mentioned, and this I think is a very interesting trend. We've all been used to serving customers reactively. So typically what we do is we try and resolve problems faster. We try and solve experience faster. I think the big shift that's going to come, and because of IoT and because Shubhajit mentioned IoT, one of the functions of IoT is to drive information to the producer that something is going to fail before even the customer comes to know about it. I think that's a very powerful feature of IoT, which we have not explored in customer experience. And I think that's going to be a very large game changer. Just like how Tesla, the car tells Elon Musk that your car is going to fail before he even tells you. And that's a huge customer experience game changer. So just to take on that point.
And thanks, Anil. And in fact, since we are on the point, I think a lot of companies are setting up a concept of control towers, which basically overlooks the entire supply chain on a real-time basis and sort of alerts any sort of a failure or a breakdown, to proactively handle. So I think that will become normal.
Yeah, and the challenge therefore would be to integrate that into the customer journey and the customer experience metrics and take on the entire demand journey. So I'm going to go next to Namrita, if you want to come on with your top three, all yours.
Yeah, okay. So I think one of the trends that I see is what COVID has done is really opened up the opportunity for a lot more collaboration than ever before. And I think we saw that with what has happened with the vaccine as a classic example. So agility was one aspect, but I think there was also a lot of collaboration happening across the globe, across different stakeholder groups, etc. But I see this coming into play, working in the chemical industry, where there's a lot of R&D involved. If I look at it from that perspective, and I think this is going to have a huge impact, even as we move forward in terms of that collaboration happening online, offline. The new, platforms which are coming up for collaboration. There are offline collaborations which are happening a lot more. So I see those synergies being drawn together like never before. So that's one trend that I see in a big way. The second trend that I see is around decentralization. And again, I'll go back to the reverse urbanization that I talked about earlier, and it's linked to that. So when I'm talking about decentralization, I think one of the reasons a lot of organizations, including ours, survived was because of the fact that we had 20 different plants in 5 different geographies across the world. And so each one of those plants was, able to independently, serve itself, as well as be, a go-to place for another plant which may be disrupted because of COVID. So this kind of decentralization that I see, this was maybe not done by design earlier, but I see this happening by design as we move forward. Now, what is the implication of this from a marketing point of view? The marketing perspective is that, when you have decentralization happening, when you have hubs coming up, as we had spoken earlier, in, the rural areas, in those cases, with that kind of decentralization, it just opens up a lot many more opportunities for, marketers to do the focus on local, as Sarajit had mentioned earlier, people are more conscious, but they're also going back to a lot more local stuff. I think with those sensibilities from, the cities, when they go back, their appreciation for local is a lot greater. So I see that, along with the ESG factor sort of becoming a huge trend as we move forward. And then finally, I think the third area that I see is really in terms of a lot of connected living. And this was just building up on your IoT point, I think, the level of connected living that we've had so far is still very much the tip of the iceberg. I see that, being disrupted in a big way, and really, your smart home, your smart office, your everything is going to converge and come onto, one single device, or you may become the walking, talking sort of, device. And it's a scary sight, but the reality is that's what we are heading towards, very, very connected living. So those are the three areas.
Thank you, Namrata. Thank you for those thoughts. And Tejas, I'm going to come to you next. And before I come to you though, Tejas, you did mention that, you were one of those guys who are quite happy the fact that COVID was around the corner and made companies realize that they need to go in for CRMs. Let me also add my name to that list, because I think what has happened is now, because of this whole hyper-personalization and localization need, brands are recognizing the fact that you need to understand customer emotions and context and marry that with data. And that's really a sweet spot for me, because I really love that. The fact that for the first time in conversation, we are saying, how do I measure emotions and how do I measure contexts, which is something that we do for a living. So I think I kind of share a little bit of that optimism with you, Tejas. So over to you now for your quick 3 points, and then I'll come to you, Samrid, after that. Tejas, you're on mute. Mute.
Sorry. I think that is definitely a trend to be on mute while you're on talk. But I think the 3 core things which I was talking: hyper personalization, hyper local, and get the customer to buy by not coming to the store, but being at your house and let the product come to the house, right? So I think those 3 combinations, and obviously the concept of, I definitely am really gung-ho on 2 things. One is that whole multilingual, and the concept of this voice, which is really coming up. This voice commerce, I think, has a really huge potential for a lot of customers, a lot of brands to take on how customers will buy in the future. So that's the 3-4 things which we are currently focusing on. And we believe that combination of all is how it's trending to, right? And it's not only in India. We've been working with brands across Southeast Asia. We're doing a lot of stuff in India on the same basis itself. What everyone was saying, that irrespective whichever the channel the customer is, and if I'm able to intermingle on what the customer is searching on a Google, with the mechanics on what you were saying on, understanding the sentiment of, what feedback the customer has given to me, and bring that to a view from the brand end, saying that, okay, I know you not only from what you're buying, but also from what feedback you've given, what are the other things which you're doing. I think that will enable the experience to go to the next level for sure. I think that's the 3 core things which we are looking into in the trends forward. Sure.
Thank you, Tejas. An extra bonus points for keeping that really short and point. All right, Samrid, all yours.
Yeah. 3 things, right? One is there are new ways.
That's also fine with me.
New ways of self-expression here. I think the way the world has gone, right? People are finding new ways to express themselves. So there are more content creators that have come up in the last, 5-6 years maybe, and accelerated further because of the entire COVID thing. More people have become content creators, which is fantastic. So that people are finding different ways of expressing themselves. I actually hate the fact that TikTok is gone. I loved it. I thought it democratized the power of content creation, and it was entertaining. I'm hoping something comes and replaces it with that kind of aplomb. So self-expression, which also borders on the idea of self-care. Because when you want to express yourself, when you're on camera, you want to look good, you want to feel good, you're concerned about the way you look, you're concerned about the way you dress and all of that, right? This is actually very close. I mean, I'm getting to see all of you so close, so I get to see your faces so closely, right? So Zoom has done that. It's brought people very close to each other from the face perspective.
That's pretty scary.
Second thing, it is, isn't it? People get to see the pores of your skin. The second thing is there are new ways of entertainment and learning, right? And I think that's phenomenal. People have taught themselves how to learn. So there are more bakers and home chefs now than there were earlier, right? And it's insane because people have just found a way to teach themselves through this entire lockdown. And I think that's going to be a behavior shift. It's going to remain for a while. And the last piece is the way we are engaging with machines. And that's a fundamental shift. Peter spoke about it. It's about voice, right? But it's also about GUI. It's also about being able to just tap a button and just wait for the thing to happen. We have become a very impatient economy because we expect the button to be pressed and things to happen automatically. And if it doesn't happen, it's almost like, yeah. So it's like that, right? So we have become impatient. We are consuming more. We are creating more. We are learning different ways. And we are engaging with machines very differently. So for me, I think those are the three tectonic shifts.
Thank you so much. Normally I would not dare to disagree with you on anything except this one point that you just mentioned, that people will continue to be bakers and cooks. As a behavior change specialist myself, let me tell you that human beings are incredibly lazy and they would want to go to the least painless option as soon as possible. Therefore, this baking and cooking is going to go out of the window as soon as restaurants open up. So watch that space. And like I said, normally I would not dare to disagree with you on anything, but on this one, I may have to
I know, I agree. I'm just saying that they learned how to do it very fast.
That's because your wife hounded you, Samrit.
My son more than my wife, but yeah.
All right. So Sarojit, you have to wrap up your three.
So quickly, just to give three counter trends to what everybody said. So, which will be actually mediating. So quickly, customers want Know-Me, which underpins the hyper-personalization. Know-Me will come against privacy. You've seen the whole Apple versus Facebook warfare going at the highest level. Second, customers want Woo-Me, which is delight, which is hyper-localization and delivery. It will run up against the inclusiveness, healthcare concerns, safety concerns. You're seeing what Uber cab drivers versus the ladies of Gurgaon is going on. And lastly, customers want Serve Me. So within that, I think the supply chains and using all of the technology, but I'm quite a bit of a pessimistic because I see more and more people going below the algorithm, which is that they are dictated by the algorithm to say, go and deliver this there, and lesser people over the algorithm, and rewards are, of course, getting disproportionately allocated between the two. Over to you, Dr. Anil.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm going to do a quick time check with Agya. Agya, how are we doing on time? And do we have another 10 minutes? Or what?
We have just 2 minutes.
We started late, so you'll have to give us that extra 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Okay, well then, over to you, Doctor, for another 10 minutes.
No. I just wanted one quick take from all the participants, and then I'll sum up. And then one quick take was, how will this all impact employees within organizations? Just one take, because we're short on time, but we have promised our audience that we'll also look at internal teams. So we'll just start with the random order. Who is ready? Probably Subhajit, you can go first. What do you think all this what we spoke about over the last 55 minutes, what is that disruption that it's going to cause to an employee or to teams within enterprises? Subhajit, you go first.
Yeah, look, I mean, one thing is very clear, Anil, that, for any employee today, that one has to constantly upgrade himself or herself. Basis the changing dynamics. And I think it was no different earlier, but the pace has changed dramatically because of COVID. And it's all about, how you sort of re-engineer yourself, how you recalibrate yourself and sort of align, because at the end of the day, it's whether you deliver value or not. So I think...
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a quick second here. I'm noticing this trend of people going on the splurge of doing certification courses, one after the other, in this need for constantly upgrading themselves. How different is that from what you're saying?
See, I mean, I guess certification is only one route or a path. There are a number of other things that one can do. And I think the bigger learning is through observation, to be honest. And that observation can come from anywhere and need not be through a structured curriculum. Yes, the curriculum puts you into a sense of discipline, and especially if you're investing money, you get some sort of an urge to complete it. But I guess more than that, the curiosity of people, as long as you have that, I think that's good enough a driving force to be aligned with whatever is required to be done. So those who are stuck within their comfort zones, I think will find it difficult. But those who have an open mind and open to learning will continue to do well. I mean, that's my view.
Very good. Thank you so much. Samrit, what's your one thing that you think is going to impact employees?
I think people are just going to be scared, and that's it. They'll find their own ways of handling it, but honestly speaking, I'm not so sure that everyone's going to be able to upskill themselves. Most people are so caught up in the day-to-day. There's such an operational pressure on just the largest portion of the workforce in the country that I think all of this is beyond the comprehension and the action plan that they have, right? It needs to be a top-down thing. So I think leaders need to upskill workforces. It can't be people upskilling themselves. That's my point of view. People are just going to be scared. They will see some shifts happening across, but they won't be aware of the actual implication of that shift till they're not bang in the thick of when that shift has already happened.
Okay. So Rajit, your view?
No, I agree. I think, there are only three real professions: medicine, chartered accountancy, and legal, where you need a certificate to actually practice, and you have to, raise the bar every time, literally and otherwise. So if all of us will have to think of ourselves is that I often am caught telling myself and my team that, frankly, if there was a certification that we needed to do, like medicine and legal and all of us will be without a job. So I think, and how we cope with that scope is what Samrit said. We'll all have to find out our own median and trade-offs and balances. But it's not going to be this rising tide raises all boats has happened for the last 20 years. Every idiot and their brother was making a lot of money and growing their careers. I think from here, it's going to be a lot non-linear ahead.
Right. And so you're saying that spread is going to be a much more skewed towards people who are bringing in real value, as Subhajit said, versus people who are just getting, going up because the economy was doing well and things were just going up.
Yeah. Also, careers will not be linear. We'll have to program ourselves. I mean, earlier it was 3 years promotion or less than that. Great. More than that, you're a laggard. I think we have to take ourselves that we will not be in a single job. We will not be doing the same kind of things. We might have to take forced sabbaticals. And not having employment for a period of time needs to lose its stigma. It's not a failure. It's just a state of how things are.
Understood. Tejas, your view? Okay, Tejas, you once again are...
I agree with all three. I think adaptability is going to be the key. They will have to start learning. And as rightly put, the corporates will have to start pushing that learning, right? There's no way. I mean, human beings are lazy by nature, right? And unless you are forced upon to get it done, like what you were saying, that there is a doctor, you are forced to get the degree to practice it, right? Right. So unless that force happens, people are not going to do it. So you have to adapt, or else you will not be able to progress linearly. I completely
absolutely agree. So you're right, and in our business there are a lot of Hakims who are half.
Right. Just to put it through that, you will have to start learning things beyond what you've ever learned if you really have to survive through. And it is becoming, the world is becoming smaller, and you will start have to think beyond what you've ever done at a global level to take it forward from.
Perfect. And the last word, of course, goes to Namrata. All yours.
Okay, so while I agree with everyone, I think there are a couple of other things which come to mind, which sort of corroborate what everyone has said. No, I'm just building it around that, which is around this lifelong learning that we're talking about. There's already evidence of that happening. So if you look at Harvard, they're considering at this point in time whether they should look at a lifelong MBA as opposed to a 2-year MBA, and so that's already work in progress. I think given the fact that we're looking at 100-year lifespans, becoming a reality in the not so distant future, this is going to be required for us to, sort of reinvent ourselves. So I typically sort of agree with everyone that we're going to be forced to go down this path. The pace at which and, the scale at which we adapt and orient ourselves will differ from person to person.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's been a fascinating discussion. I'm going to kind of put some few points that I've heard throughout the last hour and then as a closing. So one of the things that we've learned today is that there is going to be significant spending and consumption that's going to come into our economy, and that is already happening. And there's no rural, urban and urban economy unless it's geographically structured in our heads. It's a matter of how consumers look at it and where they are in their evolution of needs. Customer segments may or may not evolve, but the way customers are buying has certainly changed. They're demanding much more. They're demanding much more both in terms of products. They're demanding much more in terms of experiences. We are looking at localization and contextualization for India and for consumers themselves. So on the one hand, you're looking at language contextualization, you're looking at usage contextualization, but you're also looking at what it means for me as a consumer when we, as typically what we call as a segment of one. Then there is something that was music to my ears, that is this whole drive towards simplicity and creating friction-free journeys. Over the last decade, I've been shouting from the rooftops that look at creating frictionless, simple journeys as opposed to creating these wow moments and Disney World being your benchmark. And it's happy to see that, the drive to simplicity is now taking center stage. So that's fantastic. And we're also looking at the whole fact of that customers are looking at things like microfinancing, new markets, new opportunities coming into play. So you will see new context. Customers want things today. So you'll find, you're looking at logistics being very important. The line between B2B and B2C has blurred. So Sarojit, please take note. I've learned something in the last 1 hour. All right. So yeah, so these are all some of the top line takeaways. Technology, whether it's digitalization, AI, or VR is going to play a large role in bringing the experience to the consumer as opposed to driving the consumer to the experience. So that's another fascinating shift that perhaps we wish we shall see. Fascinating discussion as always. Thank you so much, fellow panelists. And Agya, we are just in time, the allotted time for us. All yours.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Indeed, a power-packed panel discussion. Like you said, it was the best and the most power-packed of the day.
Thank you. And
smiling faces.
So it's like this, when we started this discussion, Sarojit, Subhajit, and Samrit said that we have to have this discussion with the most energy. So I think we've accomplished that, the three of you guys, Namrata and.
No, there'll be more energy when Agya sends this part of the capsule of what she said, that this was the best to all the other panelists in the other panels.
Yeah.
I think everybody is gonna have a smile as big as this on their face. So
nothing builds life like FOMO. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Subhajit. Thank you, Ms. Namrata. Thank you, Sarojit. Thank you, Tejas. Thanks. And thank you, Samrit.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks.